What's up, everyone? Welcome to Bill Bronze and Dragons. I'm your host, Bill Bron Bafflestone. So today we're having another episode of my character build series, where I present to you the Guardian Armorer. So this was a super fun build to put together because it was a really difficult build to put together, and I do enjoy a challenge when it comes to builds. I'm going to be doing two different videos for the Armorer, one for the Guardian and one for the Infiltrator armor. And to be perfectly honest, I almost gave up on the Guardian armor. That was the first one that I tried, and it just presents so many anti-synergies. I mean, it's thunder damage, so you can't use Crusher, Piercer, or Slasher. It's not a light weapon, so you can't use two-weapon fighting. You have to get dual wielder, and even if you do, you can never get any stat damage on the secondary attack because we don't have access to two-weapon fighting. We don't get a fighting style. We can't even take it through a feat because we don't have martial weapon proficiencies. Then we can't drive power attacks through it, through Great Weapon Master or through Sharpshooter. You can't use Booming Blade with it because it doesn't synergize with its extra attack. It just seemed so difficult to create any kind of decent DPR while retaining what seemed to be the intent of a tanking style character. So I went and worked on the Infiltrator for a while. That one was much easier, and it's a very interesting build. But I wanted to go back to the Guardian because I hate admitting defeat. And I also know, just from a corporate perspective, like how they do these things. You know, Wizards of the Coast and Jeremy Crawford and all the crew have a whiteboard where they create what they see as like the ultimate manifestation of a particular build. Now, of course, they can't cover everything, and once you introduce multi-classing and certain combos, things can get out of control. And I definitely think the Guardian in particular can be improved by a dip. The Infiltrator is fantastic by itself. The Guardian, I do think there's a lot of, just great dips that you can do that would probably make it better. But that said, I really wanted to do a no-dip build just to, provide a baseline for what the Armorer can do, and then, a platform from which we can improve it through multi-classing. And I think I finally got it. It wasn't easy, but I think I finally managed to put everything together where it still tanks really well. The DPR is still really competitive. In fact, it's elite at some levels. So that works. And before we begin, I want to call out again my boys in my Patreon Discord. Very, very helpful. In particular, I want to call out Samuel Cabell. He is probably the best guy in my Discord in terms of helping out, throwing out different tactics, throwing out errors that I make. I would also like to call out the Twig, because he's like the mathematician that kind of helps point out mistakes that I might make with DPR calculations, which, by the way, man, those things are so tough. Like, I would be very hesitant to accept figures from any single person, because even if you're, like a cum laude Ivy League economist like myself, without a second set of eyes, very easy to make mistakes with calculations and stuff. So anyway, thanks to those two in particular and the rest of the boys in the Discord. And if you want to support the channel, feel free to like, subscribe, comment, share, and check out the Patreon. Without further ado, let's take a look at the Guardian Armorer. So I put the setup on the screen so you can check it out. You can see that Bill Bron Guardian Armorer will be a custom race, starting with Strength 8, Dex 14, Con 14, Intelligence 17, Wisdom 12, and Charisma 8. We come with Dark Vision, and as always, I'll be comparing our build DPR to a standard DPR baseline of Agonizing Blast plus Hex, hitting 60% of the time. But I am also, from this point forward, going to be adding an elite DPR baseline as well, of a fighter with Fighting Style Archery, Crossbow Expert, and Sharpshooter, hitting 60% of the time. And I think having a standard and an elite DPR baseline is very interesting, and it allows us to get a little bit more of a sense of the capabilities of every single build. So we are going to be doing that going forward. And again, as a reminder, I do build DPR in terms of round-to-round DPR. So you know what you are doing based on the choices that you make. If you want to know what you do in what you consider to be an average battle, then you're going to have to do a little bit more math, but I've at least provided you the figures so that you can do that. So again, this build is going to optimize the Guardian armor. It's essentially impossible to create a build that can use both armor versions interchangeably because they both require different feat progressions to optimize. I will present the Infiltrator armor build in the next video, and interestingly, originally at first glance, I thought the Guardian would be better, but honestly now I think the Infiltrator is probably superior. It's easier to optimize, and I think it probably has superior impact. Got better DPR numbers, a lot of utility, and we'll cover the Infiltrator build, as I've said in my next video, and ultimately I will cover all of these crazy dynamics in detail when I do my deep dive series video on optimizing the Artificer, or the Artificer I should say. By the way, I am someone who reads a lot and doesn't consider myself a conversationalist, so I'll often mispronounce words. I had no idea I was mispronouncing Artificer, so I will try and say it right from here on out. Sorry if I was hurting anybody's ears. So our playstyle will be as a melee marshal. We can either tank at a slightly lower DPR, protecting our allies, or we can kill at a slightly higher DPR. I've made sure to include those options. And we also have the option of playing on the front line or as a striker, as necessary or desired. Finally, we will also provide the party heals, utility, and support. And the last thing I should mention is that this build is just poor at level 1. At level 2, it catches up and it's on par, and then at level 3, it starts to pass. But level 1 kind of sucks, so this is ideal for a campaign that starts at level 2 or higher. If you start at level 1, it's doable, but you are not going to be amazing. Alright, so at level 1, again, we will be going straight Artificer levels 1 through 20. We can see our starting stats. For our starting feat, we will be taking Mobile. This is going to give us synergy with our tanking playstyle because we can debuff enemies, engage with our allies, and then get separation. That'll give the enemy the choice of moving and taking the secondary damage to attack us because we'll be using Booming Blade, or they'll just engage our ally with attacks at disadvantage, and that's what we want. Plus the additional 10-foot move and the difficult terrain rider are always fantastic, so Mobile is a great starting feat here. I will say it's very tempting to take a half feat here and start with that juicy Intelligence 18, but I decided not to go in that direction for a variety of reasons, mostly because it just makes your levels 1 and 2 super bad, and we don't really need a great intelligence until level 3, so adding the half feat at level 4 is going to be more optimal in my opinion. So we start with Mobile. Our beginning cantrips will be Guidance and Booming Blade. Guidance is self-explanatory, you always take it when you can, and Booming Blade will be our main attack. Mobile will allow us to reliably proc the secondary damage. Now, I want to explain this a little bit because in previous videos I've had comments that don't seem to understand how this works. You hit them and then you separate so that when their turn comes up, you're not next to them. So they are forced to either move and close to melee range to attack us and eat the secondary damage, or they don't move and don't attack us or attack our ally at disadvantage, and that's also fine. The separation forces them to choose to be effective or to take damage. That's what I mean by Mobile allowing us to reliably proc the secondary damage. And that goes for any separation method like Crusher or Telekinetic or whatever. Now note in the DPR column, the Booming Blade DPR shows only the secondary damage if it procs. Any added damage to the main attack will be reflected in the primary weapon figures. And note that in the column, dagger plus Booming Blade just means casting Booming Blade through the dagger. It doesn't mean a dagger attack and a Booming Blade cast. Final note, I do like Booming Blade because of the nice role-playing synergy with Thunder Gauntlets. They're both thunder damage, so I think that's pretty cool. For our spell preps, we'll take Expeditious Retreat, Cure Wounds, and Fairy Fire. Expeditious Retreat for a mobility bump and to defend or enable kiting. It's got nice synergy with Mobile, so we get 80 feet of move. Cure Wounds is self-explanatory. Fairy Fire for a nice party buff and versus invisible creatures, and this will be our first option for slots in concentration until level 5. We don't have many slots, we can't do this too often, but when we do it will be nice. Our weapon will be a dagger. And yeah, dagger is not ideal, obviously. I get it, but we are only able to use simple weapons. Dagger is the only finesse weapon. We dump strength. So this is a necessary sacrifice at levels 1 and 2 until our combat stat switches to intelligence at level 3. Our armor will be scale mail plus dex, which is not super impressive at 16, so leverage our mobility and speed to avoid damage. And our round 1 and 2 will be pretty simple. We're going to be booming blading all the time with the occasional fairy fire. At level 2, our infusions come online. To our preps, we add Absorb Elements as a self-explanatory add. It's also nice for a melee martial because it adds that little bit of extra damage as well. Our infusions known will be Enhanced Defense, Enhanced Weapon, Spell Rot Tattoo, and Homunculus. And our infusions active will be Enhanced Weapon and Homunculus. The Homunculus is for a critical DPR bump, which we need on this build, and for the added utility. It's sneaky smart at Intelligence 10, so very capable of complex tasks. It's going to be smarter than a lot of your party members. And don't forget that it can deliver useful touch spells for us. From our list, I think Guidance, Cure Wounds, Invisibility, Lesser Restoration, Fly, Revivify, Greater Invisibility, and Greater Restoration are probably the most obvious ones that you'll want to use that for. And we will add a familiar through the Spell Rot Tattoo. This is possible rules as written, but check with your DM because it's possibly a Wizards of the Coast oversight. Your DM may think that this is overpowered, in which case you can take a different infusion. Regardless, we'll assume here that we can do so, and we'll add an owl for the fly-by help action to reliably impart advantage to a single attack. And now our DPR is actually pretty good, comparable to the crossbow expert if our Booming Blade secondary damage goes off, and nearly double the standard baseline, so we're doing pretty good at second level. The owl will also be good for delivering touch spells as per the Homunculus, and it's good for defense and utility. See my deep dive series video on advanced familiar tactics for more info about all of that. For our armor, we'll go with half plate plus dex plus shield. We can now add a shield because adding infusions allows us to cast with full hands. And of course, I'm presuming affordability, but if you can't afford it, obviously use your best armor and upgrade as soon as possible. To our rounds 1 and 2, we add a bonus action Homunculus attack. At third level, we officially become armorers, and our arcane armor is online. To our spell preps, we add Magic Missile and Thunder Wave, both of which come with the subclass, and I honestly don't see casting Magic Missile very often. Thunder Wave maybe if there are tons of creatures in the AoE, but we're half casters, so to me we just have too few slots for blasting. Blasting is already pretty low return on investment, and when we don't have very many slots, it just is even worse. So we're not going to really use these too often. More importantly, the Guardian armor is online for Thunder Gauntlets and Defensive Field. We'll switch our enhanced weapon to the Armor Thunder Gauntlets, noting that we can only infuse one of our Thunder Gauntlets, and also noting that we can only apply one infusion to the armor until level 9. So we're going to have to put Enhanced Defense on the shield when we add it, which we don't currently have active. However, Heavy Armor Proficiency is basically an additional infusion. It's the same AC as Half Plate plus Dex plus Enhanced Defense, only without having to invest the Enhanced Defense, so that's pretty cool. And rules note, I am assuming that you can use Booming Blade with the Thunder Gauntlet, but technically Booming Blade does require a material component with at least 1 silver piece cost, and I'm assuming that the cost of the armor qualifies, but some DMs might be super strict and say that you can't use Booming Blade with Thunder Gauntlet, in which case you are probably not going to want to use this build, because we really need Booming Blade to keep our DPR up to par. We also get Defensive Field to get some temporary hit points. It does require a bonus action to use in combat, so don't do that. We only get proficiency times per day, so typically we're not going to have enough uses to cover every battle per day, so the most optimal use is to activate prior to battle, since temporary hit points never expire, and that will not impact your action economy during combat. Now that said, it might become worth a combat action at higher levels when the temporary hit point bump increases, and you have a lot more of them, but really not super impressive in Tier 1. I'm assuming that we can't afford plate mail, so we'll upgrade our armor to plate mail plus shield for 20. If we can't afford it, obviously we're going to go with splint mail and get the plate mail as soon as possible. No change to our round 1 and 2. At level 4, we add our first feat, which will be Fey Touched. To our spell preps, we add Misty Step and Gift of Alacrity through Fey Touched, plus Feather Fall and Detect Magic. Fey Touched will bump our intelligence to 18. Misty Step is always an elite add. I like Gift of Alacrity here as an elite no concentration, 8-hour duration initiative bump, but if the DM disallows Dunamancy on Fey Touched, then I think Hex, Dissonant Whispers, or Command are good alternative options. And we added Featherfall and Detect Magic for utility and to ease some of the pressure on our few spell slots, but we're going to drop these at the next level anyway, so a lot like placeholders, and no change to our round 1 and 2. At level 5, we get a doubling of our spell slots, we add second level spells, and extra attack. So to our preps, we add Mirror Image, Shatter, Blur, and Lesser Restoration, dropping Feather Fall and Detect Magic. Mirror Image and Shatter came with a subclass, and Mirror Image is good. It's inferior to Blur unless we need concentration, which we don't generally. But once we move up to Haste at level 9, Mirror Image can be nice if we're pre-buffing. It's not worth a combat action, especially if you are casting Haste in combat. But if you are initiating the attack and can pre-buff, Mirror Image can be nice to stack with Haste, or Blur for that matter. Shatter is just another blast that we don't have enough slots for, so we'll never cast. But Blur is the big add here. It's an elite defensive option, our first option for slots and concentration until level 9, and is great synergy with our fantastic AC. We are pumping out really good damage, we have really good defenses. Can't complain about that out of a martial, right? We have Lesser Restoration to heal the appropriate conditions, just a great spell and a nice add on a martial character. And Extra Attack is now online for a critical DPR bump, but also for our tactics, because we can now hit 2 different creatures per round and impose attacks at disadvantage for our allies. So that's going to give us 2 offensive tactical options. One, we can attack with Booming Blade, using mobile to gain separation and proc the secondary damage, or we can attack twice with Extra Attack, hitting 2 different enemies that are engaged with allies, and then use mobile to gain separation and impose disadvantage on both of those enemies' attacks. Both of these are good options, and you will deploy them opportunistically based on which one you think is going to get you the most advantage in any particular battle. That means we have some options for our round 1 and 2. When we are going defensive, we start with Blur plus our Homunculus, and then in the next round we will either attack twice with Extra Attack, or do Booming Blade plus the Homunculus attack. And if we go offensive, we just skip the Blur part, and we go right to either attacking twice with Extra Attack, or Booming Blade plus the Homunculus. At level 6, Tool Expertise and an Infusions bump comes online. To our preps, we add Web as an elite control option. Don't forget, it can also be used to knock down flying creatures that lack hover, though it will disappear after 1 round, but still a really nice tactic to have in your back pocket. To our infusions known, we will add Repulsion Shield and Radiant Weapon, and our active infusions will be the Homunculus, the Repulsion Shield, and Radiant Weapon. Nice to get the AC bump to 21 to combo with Blur, but no change to our round 1 and 2 actions. At level 7, Flash of Genius comes online to bump initiative and saves. It's really nice to add in both of those scenarios, but do note that you cannot apply it to your initiative if you're surprised. No changes to our round 1 and 2 approach. At level 8, we add another ASI to max out our intelligence. To our preps, we add Invisibility and See Invisible. Both are good utility, but also placeholders because we're dropping them at the next level, and no change to our round 1 and 2. Level 9, huge level for us. We add 3rd level spells and armor modifications. To our preps, we add Hypnotic Pattern, Lightning Bolt, Haste, and Revivify, dropping Invisibility and See Invisible. Hypnotic Pattern and Lightning Bolt came with the subclass, and wow, Hypnotic Pattern, an elite option, one of the best control spells in 5e. Such a nice add to this build because it doesn't normally get access to it, and even at 9th level, it's fantastic. Hypnotic Pattern scales really well. Lightning Bolt, not so much. It's never great, and especially at this level, but maybe if the stars align and you can get like 10 people in the AoE. More importantly, Haste is online as our primary concentration option going forward. We can now attack up to 3 enemies and gain separation if we're using tanking tactics. And now 3 enemies are attacking our allies at disadvantage. That is pretty sweet when it comes to tanking. Great synergy with mobile because we'll have 80 foot of movement to zip around and hit all of those enemies. And of course, we don't have a million slots, only 2. So Blur will be retained as an alternate option based on our slots and scenario. But between them both, we should have enough slots to hopefully last through a normal adventuring day. Revivify is self-explanatory. Always nice to have 2 party members with access to it in case the caster is the one who dies. And armor modifications are online to add 2 more infusions. So we're going to swap out Radiant Weapon for Mind Sharpener. And for our 5 active infusions, we'll go with Homunculus, Repulsion Shield, Enhanced Weapon, Enhanced Defense, and the Mind Sharpener. Our round 1 will now be Haste or Blur, or Attack ×2, or Booming Blade plus the Homunculus. And round 2 is Attack ×2 or Booming Blade plus the Homunculus. Level 10 is another big level for us because Magic Item Adept comes online, and we get 10th level infusions. We also get a cantrip, so we'll add Thorn Whip as an elite ranged pull option. Nice synergy with our tanking tactics because we can pull enemies away from an ally to us, and we can combo with the winged boots that we are about to add to pull our enemies 10 feet in the air and drop them for an additional d6 plus prone. To our spell preps, we'll add Tiny Servant for defense and utility. Can also help distribute potions of healing during combat. Not intended to be deployed offensively, but you can if you want. And it's also intended for rest tricking. So see my separate deep dive series videos on Tiny Servant and on rest tricking for more info on both of those. To our infusions known, we add Cloak of Protection and Winged Boots. And our active infusions will now be Homunculus, Enhanced Weapon, Enhanced Defense, Repulsion Shield, Winged Boots, and Cloak of Protection. Noting that our Enhanced Weapon and Enhanced Defense each bump to +2, and we are badass at this point. Winged Boots are an elite add with mobile and our tanking tactics. We're going to have an 80-foot fly speed with haste and just zipping around, attacking anybody we want and imposing that disadvantage. And then ending our turn up in the air where they can't touch us and they're just screwed on their attacks. Love it. Cloak of Protection, not super sexy, but always nice for the AC and save bump. And Magic Item Adept is online for 4 times the attunements. That is so good. Crazy good. Depends on the table how good, but regardless of what table you're at, it's going to be really good. And you can create magic items for cheap and on the quick, so that can be helpful depending on your campaign. At level 11, we add Spell Storing Item. So good. We're going to load it with Web. We're going to give it to our familiar or a Tiny Servant to weaponize its action and weaponize its concentration. And that is so good. We haven't lost anything from our abilities, and we're just adding in essentially a no concentration to us, no action to us web every battle. We can do this 10 times a day. So sweet. No change to our round 1 and 2, except that we do add the Tiny Servant web or the familiar web. At level 12, we add Dispel Magic to our preps as a caster must have. And we add an additional feat, which will be Lucky. Super sweet rerolls, one of the best feats in the game. I always try to add it. Being lucky makes us more awesome, but no changes to round 1 and 2. At level 13, we add 4th level spells. To our preps, we add Fire Shield and Greater Invisibility, both of which came through the subclass, and both of which are fantastic adds for this build. Fire Shield is an awesome, no concentration, 10-minute duration defense. That's awesome for a melee marshal because they will consistently proc the retaliation damage. And Greater Invisibility is one of the best melee marshal spells in 5th edition. Such good synergy with our tanking tactics. Now, some folks in my Patreon pointed out that the idea is to impose disadvantage on enemies attacking anyone but you. So this might be a deterrent to that, but I don't see it. Because of our Thunder Gauntlet, they are going to be attacking our allies at disadvantage. And because of Greater Invisibility, we're safe. If not because of our Winged Boots and flying up in the air, we're safe. So I feel like we're helping our allies by imposing attacks at disadvantage on the person they're engaged with. Bleeding on your behalf is a little much. I might do it on a special occasion, but as a standard tactic, I don't get it. I think everybody not taking damage is better. At level 14, we get another cantrip, so we'll add Mending. To our preps, we'll add Freedom of Movement. Mending and Freedom of Movement are both for utility, and Mending is also nice for healing our Homunculus. We get an Infusions bump, so to our Infusions known, we'll add Amulet of Health and Helm of Telepathy, making active the Amulet of Health. That gives us a huge 28 hit point bump and con save bump, so very happy to add that. And Helm of Telepathy is fantastic for special occasions. Don't be tempted to take like Helm of Awareness here. We don't have room to make it active. We want something that is elite for utility so that we might sometimes choose to swap it out. Helm of Telepathy is fantastic for that because it is elite at the interaction phase and at gathering intel. I mean, you can learn anything. See my deep dive series video on the Helm of Telepathy for more info. It's just a game-breaking item. And Magic Item Savant is online for 5 times attunements and no restrictions on items. So super crazy good. It will vary by table, but crazy good. And no real change to our round 1 and 2, although we are casting Greater Invisibility sometimes. At level 15, Perfected Armor comes online to give us a 30-foot pull option. This is not great, guys. We can combo it with the wing boots and get a drop for 3d6 damage plus prone. And I guess we may as well opportunistically, because we don't really have much competing for our reaction, but definitely a little bit of a disappointing class ability here. At level 16, we add Resilient Spear to our preps as an ultimate defense option for ourself or an ally. Can sometimes be a decent save or suck. But more importantly, we get another ASI, so we add Tough for a huge 32 hit point bump. No change to our round 1 and 2. At level 17, we get 5th level spells. To our preps, we add Pass Wall, Wall of Force, Mordenkainen's Faithful Hound, and Animate Objects, dropping Resilient Spear and Freedom of Movement. Pass Wall and Wall of Force came with a subclass. Pass Wall is actually one of my favorite spells. I think it's sneaky, fantastic utility. Great one to have in your back pocket, as always available without occupying a prep. And Wall of Force. Oh my goodness, one of the best control spells in 5th edition versus a single enemy or just a couple of enemies. Even getting it at 17th level is a huge add. Artificers don't normally get access to it. And we are adding Mordenkainen's Faithful Hound to combo with Wall of Force because those two together are auto-win. I mean, we can only do this once a day because of our slot situation, but it's a really nice combo. And we're adding Animate Objects as a great offensive option. You can see in the DPR column that it does a lot of damage. I can see casting it in the right scenario, but no change to our standard round 1 and 2 plan A. At level 18, we become Magic Item Masters. To our spell preps, we add Transmute Rock as one of the best controls in the game versus multiple enemies. The no concentration aspect of the spell is Amazeballs. To our infusions known, we're going to add Ring of Protection and Dimensional Shackles, making active the Ring of Protection. It's not super sexy, but it just stacks with everything else and continues our trend of elite defenses and elite underlying numbers. And Dimensional Shackles is nice for special occasions. Again, remembering we can't make it active, so we want something that we might want in case of utility, and Dimensional Shackles fits that bill. And do note that it will work on incapacitated enemies, which combos with Hypnotic Pattern, which incapacitates enemies. So nice synergy there. And because we're Magic Item Masters, we now get 6 attunements, just more crazy goodness. No change to our round 1 and 2. At level 19, we get our final ASI. We are going to add Alert, one of the best feats in the game, still has an impact even at this late level. And now our initiative is just awesome at +7 with Gift of Alacrity for a +D8, with the option of using Flash of Genius for a +5. We should hardly ever lose initiative at this point, and no change to our round 1 and 2. And finally, at level 20, we get our capstone, Soul of Artifice. To our preps, we add Bigby's Arcane Hand as a highly versatile offensive, defensive, grapple, and push option. But more importantly, we've got Soul of Artifice online for ridiculous saves, the Quasi-Death Ward. Don't forget to max out our 6 attunements, but if you do, look at those saves, man. So good. That's one really strong reason not to dip on the Artificer, because Soul of Artifice is one of the best capstones out there. So that's it. That is the Guardian Armorer. And I hope you like it because, man, there was a sneaky amount of hidden work to create this build. It was so hard to get it this elegant, this solid, in every aspect from DPR to maintaining the tanking tactics and maximizing those. Man, yeah. So I'm very happy with this. It really works, I think. I do think you can make it better through certain multi-classing options. Like War Wizard is a really intriguing one for, that initiative bump and that reaction. There's a couple of really interesting ones that you can do. Fighter, lots of different ones. But this one works. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Did I get it right? Is there anything that I can add to make this build even better? And regardless, thank you so much for watching. This has been Bill Bronze and Dragons. I'm your host, Bill Bron Bafflestone. See you next time.